world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 1 hour. West Asia continues to simmer as Israel and Hezbollah defy calls for de-escalation. Trade heavy fire. Top Hezbollah military commander killed in Beirut strike. UK asks citizens to leave Lebanon. UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting on Lebanon. World leaders express alarm over the prospect of a wider conflict in the region. Sri Lanka's newly elected president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, dissolves the parliament, calls snap polls on November 14th. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces no confidence motion in parliament, introduced by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in the first major test of his unpopular minority government. Voting begins in India's Jammu and Kashmir for Phase 2 polls. Over 2.5 million voters to decide the fate of 239 candidates in 26 assembly constituencies. And in sports, Indian duo of Jeevan Nedunshezian and Vijay Sundar Prashant clinched the Hangzhou Open 2024 title after beating Germany in the men's doubles final in China. Israel and Hezbollah are trading waves of strikes defying international amid calls, in fact, for de-escalation at the ongoing United Nations General Assembly as fears of a full-fledged war in West Asia mounted. The Israeli military carried out strikes on Hezbollah targets in Bekaa and several areas of southern Lebanon, which killed Ibrahim Kubaisi, a senior figure in the terrorist group Hezbollah's missile units. Strikes also killed 2 other commanders of the terrorist group. Israeli Air Force struck Hezbollah infrastructure in which weapons were stored, as well as dozens of launchers that were aimed towards Israeli territory. The IDF also said that after sirens sounded in an area near the Lebanese border and 3 drones were identified crossing from Lebanon into Israeli territory, Hezbollah announced on Tuesday that it launched an air attack with drones targeting Israel's Atlit Navy base in south of Haifa. An Israeli strike hit the Lebanese seaside town of Jiyeh for the first time early on Wednesday, 75 kilometers north of the border with Israel. Many fear the escalating violence could further destabilize the region already shaken by the conflict in Gaza. The United Nations Security Council will convene an emergency session on Wednesday to discuss escalating tensions in Lebanon for the second time in a week. It was announced by Slovenia's mission to the UN, which holds the rotating presidency of the Council, that the emergency session was requested by France. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will deliver the opening address. The Security Council previously convened an emergency session on September 20th to discuss attacks using pager and radio devices that were blamed on Israel. Britain on Tuesday mobilized hundreds of soldiers to Cyprus to help its nationals evacuate following a significant escalation between Israel and Hezbollah, and has also urged people to leave immediately. Britain has also urged its nationals to leave Lebanon and continue to advise against all travel to the country. Its Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office said contingency plans are being rolled out to support British nationals in Lebanon and the region. Around 700 troops backed by the border force would move to Cyprus. The Air Force also have aircraft and transport helicopters on standby to provide support if necessary. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Tuesday called for restraint and de-escalation on the border between Lebanon and Israel. All right, our correspondent Amit Mukherjee is joining us with more. Amit, help us understand the gravity of the situation with the escalation being witnessed, being increased, escalation being witnessed between Israel and Hezbollah on one side, and also we know how there is no solution in sight for the Gaza conflict. So tensions definitely simmering in the region, but help us understand how grave is the situation.
Well, Preeti, if you look at the whole situation, this is nothing new because this escalation was bound to happen. Ever since the Hamas people abducted people from Israel on October 7th, Hezbollah has been constantly attacking every now and then the northern territory of Israel. Rocket launchers were being used constantly at intervals. And at one point in time, it was quite evident that this kind of an escalation is going to happen, but nothing was done at that point in time. Of course, the international community is now asking for de-escalation of the situation. But as far as Israel is concerned, now it's very, very clear. It's going to go all out as far as this this engagement with Hezbollah is concerned. Initially, the engagement was only restricted to the northern borders of Israel, but now Israel has penetrated deep inside Lebanon, and as you are well aware, the viewers are also well aware, for the last 1 week or so, more than 1 week, Israel has been conducting very targeted raids on Hezbollah sites in Lebanon, Beirut to be very, very specific. Now, Israel is very clear now, the kind of intelligence they have gathered, that Hezbollah is part of the homogeneous society, which is kind of residing in Lebanon, and it is kind of mixed with the civilian population. It has been using several civilian infrastructure to launch and been using them as launch pads for rockets against Israel. So now, I mean, in fact, yesterday also Daniel Hagari, one of the commanders of Israel, made it very, very clear that the war is no longer restricted only to the border areas. They're going to dissipate. They're going to kind of dismantle every machinery of Hezbollah along the border. And for I mean, kilometers, they don't want any kind of, launch pads which were being used along the borders to attack Israel. And yes, definitely, in the coming days, we're going to see the kind of aggravations getting more and more aggravated. Maybe.
All right. So you tell us that more and more the situation is expected to further aggravate. But, Amit, we've been seeing for almost a year now how the situation in Gaza is escalating. At the same time, Israel is being attacked, from Hezbollah also, and also there are strikes from Gaza.
Right.
What options do really we have inside? Do we really see stability in the region in the days ahead? Because we're seeing internationally also many efforts are being put in place to restore peace in the region at the UN also, and also how, the US, the UK are trying to, that Israel and
Right.
Gaza mend the ways. But then is a solution really in sight for the region?
Well, it would be very speculative, but as of now, Preeti, I would like to put it in very, very clear words. There is no, it's not in sight as far as de-escalation or a ceasefire is concerned. It's not at sight anytime in the near future. Because even if you look at, Iran's president also made a statement at the UN General Assembly this morning, today, that, the kind of assault that is being carried out by Israel should not be left untouched. The world community should join together to kind of condemn it. But the fact remains that Iran has also at some point in time been kind of extending some sort of a support to Hezbollah. And Hezbollah has also been asking for a direct Iranian involvement out here. But as it stands, that since the timing of it was that since Iran would be representing itself in the UN General Assembly, it was not really advisable to go whole hog along with the Hezbollah. So a de-escalation at this point of time is not anywhere close in the sight, and it's only going to get aggravated because Israel is very, very clear about the fact that it's not going to let this kind of a situation where the citizens of Israel are facing barrages of rocket every now and then on a regular basis. So Israel has kind of put in all its intelligence. It has gathered enough intelligence and have kind of identified sites that needs to be kind of dismantled. And every day we are seeing very measured and calculative airstrikes into Lebanese territory by Israel to kind of dismantle all these machineries which are being used as, to launch of offense against Israel. Preeti?
All right, Amit, we'll leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in with those details. And in his last speech as the president before the General Assembly, Joe Biden called on nations to band together amid the spiraling conflict in West Asia. Biden declared in his final address to the UN General Assembly that the U.S. must not retreat from the world as Israel and Hezbollah militants in Lebanon are edged towards all-out war and Israel's operation against Hamas in Gaza neared the one-year mark. Biden also stressed on the need to end the West Asia conflict and the civil war in Sudan and highlighted U.S. and Western allies' support for Kyiv.
I know many look at the world today and see difficulties and react with despair, but I do not. I won't. As leaders, we don't have the luxury. I recognize the challenges from Ukraine to Gaza to Sudan and beyond. War, hunger, terrorism, brutality, record displacement of people, a climate crisis, democracy at risk, strains within our societies, the promise of artificial intelligence and its significant risk. The list goes on. But maybe because all I've seen and all we have done together over the decades, I have hope. I know there is a way forward.
Poland's President Andrzej Duda urged Russia to end the conflict with Ukraine at the United Nations General Assembly on Tuesday. Duda said that the conflict destabilizes the region and poses a direct threat to the global order and security.
Today we are facing, yet again, an extremely serious threat to global security. For the past 2.5 years, we have seen Russia's brutal aggression against neighboring Ukraine. This is a flagrant violation of fundamental norms of international law, such as the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. This unprovoked aggression is destabilizing the region and posing a direct threat to the global order and security. We cannot allow this war to turn into another frozen conflict.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres denounced a growing number of governments and other groups who feel they are entitled to get out of jail free card on Tuesday.
Excellencies, the level of impunity in the world is politically indefensible and morally intolerable. Today, a growing number of governments and others feel entitled to get out of jail free card. They can trample international law. They can violate the United Nations Charter. They can turn a blind eye to international human rights conventions or the decisions of international courts. They can thumb their nose at international humanitarian law. They can invade another country, lay waste to whole societies, or utterly disregard the welfare of their own people. And nothing will happen.
The UN Security Council held a meeting of a high-level briefing on the UN-Russia conflict. Addressing the council members, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved through negotiations alone. Russia must be forced into it. Zelensky emphasized that the conflict will not end because someone grows weary or through any deal with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Instead, he urged Western nations to back his victory plan, a strategy he claims could break Moscow's resolve, even having a psychological impact on Putin.
Putin has broken so many international norms and rules that he won't stop on his own. Russia can only be forced into peace. And that is exactly what's needed. This war can't be calmed by talks. Action is needed.
Zelensky also condemned North Korea and Iran, labeling them as de facto accomplices for supplying arms to Russia.
Russia has no legitimate reason, none at all, for making Iran and North Korea de facto accomplices in its criminal war in Europe, with their weapons, killing us, killing Ukrainians, and helping Putin steal our land from our people.
Meanwhile, Russian forces have begun storming the eastern Ukrainian town of Volodya, a stronghold that resisted Russian attacks since the beginning of the 2022 war. Russia's defense ministry said its forces had defeated Ukrainian units at a series of settlements, including Volodya, which Russians call Yugleda, and the eastern grouping of Russian forces had improved their tactical positions. The General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces reported on Tuesday that Russian troops had launched 8 attacks around Volodya and 2 nearby villages. Russia struck a high-rise apartment block and a bakery in Kharkiv, northeastern Ukraine, killing at least 3 and injuring 34. A guided bombs tore through the 9th-storied building, leaving multiple floors in ruins, with people feared trapped beneath the rubble. The brutal attack also extended south of Zaporizhia, where Russian forces launched another strike, injuring 7 people. This surge in violence comes as world leaders, including President Zelensky, convene in New York for the UN General Assembly, underscoring the war's relentless toll. You're watching DD India News. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, Jens Stoltenberg to step down as NATO chief after 10 years to be replaced by former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Mexico protesters target Senate over missing students as they prepare to mark 10th anniversary of the tragedy. Dior comes up with an athletic, modern, all black and white collection at its Spring-Summer 2025 show in Paris. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. Sri Lanka will witness snap elections on 14th of November this year after President Anura Kumara Dissanayake dissolved the parliament late on Tuesday night. A gazette notification was issued on the dissolution and calling elections. Nominations will be received from 4th to 11th October. Dissanayake was elected as President of Sri Lanka in a close 3-cornered fight. His alliance, National People's Power, has only 3 members in the current legislature, 2 of whom are part of the cabinet, including Prime Minister Dr. Haryana Amarasuriya. All right, Dr. Ahmed Muin Farooqi joins us from Colombo. Ahmed, good morning. Sri Lanka will witness snap elections on November 14th this year. And we saw President Dissanayake dissolve the parliament late on Tuesday. Help us understand the political procedure. How do the process move on from here?
Preeti, you see, Sri Lanka adopts a very complex kind of political system. There's a presidential election which we have just seen over the last week, in which National People's Power candidate Anura Kumara Dissanayake won by a very, only by assuming about 42%, and thereby later on, for the first time in the history of Sri Lanka, a second round of counting had ensued. Thereafter, he was declared as the president. Now, he has announced that the parliament would be dissolved because there is a parliament which is a 225-member house here in Sri Lanka, and this is the one which takes care of the legislative activity of the government of Sri Lanka. As of now, as we are talking about the parliament, in the outgoing parliament, the National People's Power only had 3 members. Now, with the election coming in another 7 weeks, there is a possibility that NPP will increase its number. And it is also expected that people will come out and vote in its favor in huge numbers. What exactly happens here is there are 22 electoral districts in which there are going to be multi-member constituencies, and 196 members will be elected from these 22 electoral districts. And there will also be a national list from which 29 members will be nominated on the basis of proportionate vote share of each of the parties, totally taking the strength of the House to 225. In the outgoing house, it was SLPP who had fought the election under Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the then president, in 2020. And they had around 108 members in the house, while there were other members from SJP as well as from the other political parties in the island. Now, as the political landscape has changed, with SLSP not having a presence in the political arena, UNP also having wiped out its presence in 2020's general election, and SLPP, which has seen a very poor performance in the recent presidential elections. It is very interesting to see how will all of the remaining parties perform, how will NPP perform, how will the opposition party SJP, Samagli Jana Balawegya, how will they perform? And if there's going to be any further coalition coming up, because you see, from October 4th to 11th, there's going to be acceptance of nomination papers, and this will be interesting. Now, all sorts of discussions will happen between the rival parties as to how the seats would be, decided upon, and how they will go ahead with the coalition.
All right, so that was about the political setup in Sri Lanka. But then, Ahmed, during the economic and political turmoil in 2022, we saw how the then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, took the presidentship of the country, given the circumstances at that time. Having said that, help us understand the role and the powers of the Prime Minister in the island nation, and also was it on the expected lines that Dissanayake dissolved the parliament, because it has been dissolved 11 months ahead of the schedule?
Yes, you see, as I already mentioned, NPP only has 3 members in the entire parliament, and to run a government you require cabinet ministers. They do not have sufficient numbers in the parliament, and that was the primary reason why the NPP would have thought that this would be an opportune moment to go ahead with the dissolution. Yes, previously in 2022, Ranil Wickremesinghe, although he was a single member from his party, that too not even elected, in fact, he had only come out to national list, that is on the basis of proportionate of the vote representation of his party. He was elevated to the position of president, while just before that, he was the prime minister. Prime minister, you see, he shares quite a lot of responsibilities from among the cabinet ministers. The prime minister will assist the president in day-to-day matters, will assist the president in advising the various decisions that have to be taken, will also be the one person who will guide the cabinet. So a lot of responsibility rests on prime minister, although the president here is the executive head. He's the head of state as well as head of the government as well as the head of armed forces. So president has immense power, but prime minister is also very important in guiding the policies of the government and helping the president in taking them forward. Please.
All right. Also, Ahmed, very quickly, how do you gauge the nerve of the people? You told us about the political setup in the country. Very quickly, apprise us about who could be the prominent candidates, and how do you judge or gauge the pulse of the people?
Preeti, to begin with, yesterday, Dr. Haryana Amarasuriya from NPP has been made the Prime Minister. And it's for the first time that an academic has been made the Prime Minister who has a PhD as well. She is an India alumnus. Now, going forward, NPP has said that a candidate who would have the highest vote share will be made the Prime Minister in the coming Parliament. Now, currently speaking, yes, there are going to be lots of discussions among the various parties with regard to forming an alliance. But currently speaking, people who had been protesting in 2022 had been asking for a change. There was a strong desire for change felt, and that was what was seen in the presidential election. Probably similar kind of a thought will continue even in the parliamentary election. That said, most of the poll surveys as of now, which are talking about a hung kind of a parliament, they are indicating a close fight between SJP, the opposition party right now, and the NPP, the parties from which President Anurag Dissanayake belongs to. But still, a lot of floating vote or the fence sitters will probably be thinking whom to vote, and they would not yet be decided. And it needs to be seen how the coming 7 weeks will pan out, and thereafter, when the elections happen, probably that would be the time where people would make up their minds and go ahead and vote, choose which will be the most ideal party to whom they should vote, and who would be the most ideal to lead the country. Please.
All right, Ahmed, we leave it here. Thank you so much for joining us with those details. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces a no-confidence motion in the Parliament introduced by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Trudeau's main rival in Canada's Parliament on Tuesday introduced a motion of no confidence in the ruling Liberals in a first major test of his unpopular minority government. Following a debate in the House of Commons, a vote on the long-shot Conservative motion is scheduled on Wednesday. The motion follows the New Democratic Party's exit from a coalition with the Liberals. The confidence vote will be his first real test since the smaller New Democratic Party this month tore up a 2022 deal to keep the Liberals in office until an election that must be held by end of October next year. Trudeau will have to survive a series of further confidence votes to make it that far. Canada is considering to follow the United States in banning the sale of connected vehicles incorporating Chinese technology. Expressing concerns on security, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said that Canada also has real security concerns about the technology on Tuesday. Earlier this month, Freeland also signaled that Ottawa would likely impose further tariffs on Chinese batteries, tech products and critical minerals. Canada in August slapped 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicle imports, matching US measures. Meanwhile, China has slammed the measures as unfair and referred them to the World Trade Organization. Jens Stoltenberg will step down after 10 years as NATO's Secretary General in October and will be replaced by former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Stoltenberg held his final NATO summit as the chief on July 9th. Last year, NATO decided to extend Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg's contract by a further year, opting to stick with an experienced leader. Stoltenberg, a former Prime Minister of Norway, has been the Transatlantic Security Alliance's leader since 2014 and has guided the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that is NATO, through a series of crises since taking charge. His tenure had already been extended 3 times previously. Italy's President Giorgia Meloni urged the United Nations to fight illegal human trafficking and criminal organizations at the General Assembly on Tuesday.
I problemi del cosiddetto Sud globale.
Our objective before tens of thousands of people who face desperate journeys to enter Europe illegally is to first guarantee their rights, to not have to immigrate and to not have to cut their ties with their homeland simply because they have no other choice. It's a desperation on which the reckless criminal organizations that are more and more powerful and ratified profit. I proposed a year ago from this podium to declare a global war against human traffickers, and I'm happy to see that the appeal did not fall on deaf ears.
Completamente nuovo.
Venezuela's Attorney General Tariq Saab said that he has requested Interpol to issue an arrest warrant for Argentine President Javier Milei, the latest in a diplomatic spat between the two countries. Earlier on Monday, Argentina's federal justice body requested the arrest of Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro, citing human rights violation. The spat stems from the seizure of a Venezuelan airplane in Buenos Aires in June 2022. Venezuela accused Milei of 7 crimes, including robbery. Meanwhile, former Spanish Prime Minister Jose Luis Rodriguez Zapatero said that he participated in negotiations which allowed Venezuela's leader of the opposition, Edmundo Gonzalez, to flee and seek refuge in Spain. Zapatero said that he will always help Venezuela regain hope through dialogue to find a peaceful solution. Gonzalez flew to Spain on September 8th to seek asylum hours after quitting his country amid a political and diplomatic crisis over July's disputed election. Protesters in Mexico City continue to demand justice during a demonstration over the 43 missing students from Ayotzinapa case. Now, Mexico is preparing to mark the 10th anniversary of the tragedy on September 26th. 10 years later, it is still not clear whether the students, in fact, where the students are. In 2014, 43 students disappeared from the southwestern city of Iguala, reportedly abducted by corrupt police working with a local drug cartel. So far, only 3 of the students' remains have been positively identified. A decade later, families of the missing students are still seeking answers. The remnants of Tropical Storm Jean continue to whip western Mexico with strong winds and heavy rain on Tuesday, bringing a risk of flash flooding that was expected to persist for several more days. Stretching across several Mexican states, the storm uprooted trees and electrical posts and ripped off roofs as it made landfall on Monday, officials said. At least 2 people were killed by a landslide near Oaxaca, and the 3 deaths were reported in the mountainous area of Guerrero. The National Head of Emergency Services said John could further bring intense rainfall over Guerrero, one of Mexico's poorest states. Let's get to global weather updates now. Tropical storm Helen is now gaining strength and forecast to become a large, dangerous hurricane before it strikes Florida's Gulf Coast on Thursday night. Evacuations are underway and time is running out for Floridians to prepare, as Helen is due to make landfall in the U.S. state of Florida on September 26th as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. The National Hurricane Center warned that the storm could bring life-threatening storm surge as high as 15 feet, hazardous winds and around 10 inches of rain to parts of Florida, most of which is under a state of emergency. The storm is also projected to dump heavy rain and trigger possible mudslides across the region. Addressing the world leaders at the UN General Assembly, UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned that the planet is on the trajectory to careen past the global limit of 1.5 degrees temperature rise.
We are in a climate meltdown. Extreme temperatures, raging fires, droughts, and epic floods are not natural disasters. They are human disasters, increasingly fueled by fossil fuels. No country is spared.
And now we take a look at other stories making it to the headlines from across the world. Dior presented an athletic, modern and technological collection, all in black and white, at its Spring-Summer 2025 show in Paris. Maria Grazier's Dior collection took a sporty turn, blending athletic prowess with an urban menace on Tuesday. The Paris show's stripped-down designs evoked a 60s sci-fi aesthetic reminiscent of Star Trek, but with an edge, daring, asymmetrical shapes paired with knee-high boots that flirted with danger. A new exhibition exploring the vast network of the Silk Road trade routes opens at the British Museum in London this week, showcasing a range of artifacts including Indian garnets found in Suffolk, England, to a small Buddha figurine retrieved in Sweden. Silk Roads focuses specifically on the period AD 500 to 1000 amid the rise of empires and religions. You're watching DD India News. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, India's External Affairs Minister emphasizes that peace on the border is necessary for normalization of relations with China while interacting at the Asia Society Policy Institute. Campaigning picks up in North India's Haryana. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to address a public rally in Sonipat. AIIMS issues red alert, rainfall warnings across many states in India. Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. Let's get you the top stories once again. West Asia continues to simmer as Israel and Hezbollah defy calls for de-escalation. Trade heavy fire. Top Hezbollah military commander killed in Beirut strikes. UK asks citizens to leave Lebanon. UN Security Council to hold an emergency meeting on Lebanon. World leaders express alarm over the prospect of a wider conflict in the region. Sri Lanka's newly elected president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, dissolves parliament, calls snap polls on November 14th. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces no confidence motion in Parliament, introduced by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in the first major test of his unpopular minority government. Voting begins in India's Jammu and Kashmir for Phase 2 polls. Over 2.5 million voters to decide the fate of 239 candidates in 26 assembly constituencies. And in sports, Indian duo of Jeevan Nedunshazian and Vijay Sundar Prashant clinched the Hangzhou Open 2024 title after beating Germany in the men's doubles final in China. India's Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir is voting for the second phase today. Voting began at 7 a.m. in 26 assembly constituencies spread across 6 districts of the Union Territory, including the summer capital Srinagar, in which around 2.5 million voters are eligible. This phase is particularly significant as it will determine the fate of 239 candidates. A multi-tier security blanket has been thrown around each polling station to ensure voting in an atmosphere free of fear. Now, booths are also guarded by CCTV cameras to keep a nab on any untoward incident. Further, there are more than 150 special polling stations, including pink polling stations, stations manned by specially abled persons and youth, border polling stations, green polling stations, and unique polling stations. A selfie point has also been created at the booths to encourage voting. Besides, over 15,500 Kashmiri migrant voters are also expected to vote across special polling stations set up in Jammu, Udhampur and Delhi. Voting for second phase will conclude at 6 p.m. Jammu and Kashmir Assembly election is being conducted in 3 phases, with voting for third and final phase scheduled for 1st of October. The first phase on September 18th witnessed an impressive turnout of over 61%. Counting of votes will take place on October 8th. Assembly elections are being held for the first time in Jammu and Kashmir after abrogation of Article 370. Tahir Nadeem Khan joins us from Jammu. Tahir, good morning. Now, this is the second phase of polling in Jammu and Kashmir. It is a little too early to talk about the voter turnout, but get us, what are you picking up? Have people started coming to the polling stations to exercise their franchise? How has the day begun?
Well, Preeti, the voting for penultimate phase has already started smoothly at 7 a.m. dot in all the 3,502 polling stations. And we are at least 75,28,000 voters will decide the fate of 239 candidates, including that of former Chief Minister Omar Abdullah, BJP State President Ravinder Rana, and Congress State President Tariq Hamid Kara. So it's a very, very important phase, and as you said, the polling started exactly at 7 a.m. and all the arrangements have been put in place, especially as you talked about pink polling stations, those youth polling stations, green polling stations, unique polling stations. But the special thing this time is that 31 border polling station has been established. These include those polling stations which are very near to the LOC in Poonch and Rajouri district, including one in Noorkot, Balakot, and then those Krishna Ghati and Dagwar Malti. These are the polling stations which I am referring. In these areas, people never ever try to venture out of their houses before sunrise because of the hostile these LOC and shelling every now and then there. But this time, perhaps this is one of those rare days when voters have started coming out of their houses at 6 a.m. and they have converged at their respective polling station at 6:30 a.m., which is a very encouraging sign and shows their love for democracy and their courage and determination to cast their franchise to vote in these difficult and perhaps the life-threatening circumstances, which is not only encouraging but motivating as well. Long queues have already been seen in these polling stations, not in these polling stations, in all the polling stations, but these are the special ones. And as you said, webcasting facility has been provided in all the polling stations to ensure the transparency, and multi-tier security is also there. Right now, the early trends show that in first phase we are 61.38% polling station was established. This time the same thing will be replicated as the long queues of these voters.
All right.
All
right, so that was about the excitement and enthusiasm of the voters, Tahir. But help us understand, what are the prominent features of the second phase of polling? 26 26 assembly constituencies are going to polls in this phase. How is this second phase different from the first phase that has already been held? Help us understand what are the highlights of this phase.
Well, the highlight is especially these border polling stations, because Rajouri and Poonch are located on LOC, all along the LOC. This is the highlight of the thing, and the people, the way voters are coming in large number, it clearly shows their love and respect for democracy and their enthusiasm to elect their nominee, their candidate after 10 years gap. And as you said, what is special, what differs from this, in Chenab Valley 3 polling station, there is no LOC, no international border in those polling stations in all the 3 districts. But these districts, both Rajouri Poonch, not Riyasi, but Rajouri Poonch, they are located on the LOC. So people coming in such large number make this election very, very special for both the government and these people as well. And their aspiration, they want peace. They want peace on the borders, because to sustain their livelihood, the peace is imperative for them. There is first and foremost priority is that LOC should fall silent. They should can do their household activities. They can earn their livelihood.
All right, Tahir. Thank you so much for joining in with those details. And electioneering is also gaining momentum in North India's Haryana. Top leaders of all the parties are holding rallies and public meetings to garner support in the favour of their party in the state. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will address a public rally in Sonipat on Wednesday. Voting for the 90-member Legislative Assembly in Haryana will be held in a single phase on October 5th, while counting will be done on October 8th. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a successful and substantial visit to the US. DD India's Amritpal Singh puts the visit in its proper context for you. Take a look.
It was a hectic 56-hour visit, one that's being described as fruitful and substantial. The Prime Minister had a host of engagements.
The visit began with Prime Minister Modi receiving a warm welcome as he landed at the Philadelphia airport on Saturday. He later interacted with the Indian community on his arrival in Delaware. His first engagement was a bilateral meeting with US President Joe Biden at his home in Greenville, Delaware. Describing the meeting, which lasted over an hour, the Prime Minister said their talks were extremely fruitful. He wrote on X, and I quote, "We had the opportunity to discuss regional and global issues during the meeting." Later in the day, Prime Minister Modi attended the Quad Summit hosted by President Joe Biden in Wilmington, Delaware.
हमारी बैठक ऐसे समय हो रही है जब विश्व तनावों और संघर्षों से घिरा हुआ है। ऐसे में साझा डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज के आधार पर क्वाड का मिलकर साथ चलना पूरी मानवता के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है।
The Quad leaders also announced the Quad Cancer Moonshot, a partnership aimed at combating cervical cancer in the Indo-Pacific. On the sidelines, the Prime Minister held pull-aside meeting with Australian and Japanese counterparts. On Sunday, Prime Minister Modi addressed a gathering of over 13,000 Indian Americans at the Long Island in New York. Describing India as a land of opportunities, Prime Minister Modi shared his ambitious goals for the nation during his third term.
भारत आज लैंड ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटीज है। बीते 10 साल में भारत ने हर सेक्टर में अपॉर्चुनिटीज का एक नया लॉन्चिंग पैड तैयार किया है।
Prime Minister Modi also announced the opening of 2 new consulates in Boston and Los Angeles, addressing a long-standing demand of the Indian-American community in these major cities. Later in the day, he interacted with top CEOs from the tech sector at a roundtable in New York. Prime Minister Narendra Modi provided them assurances regarding India's unwavering commitment to safeguarding intellectual property rights and nurturing tech innovation. On the last day of his US visit, Prime Minister Modi addressed the UN Summit of the Future at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
Success of humanity lies in our collective strength, not in the battlefield.
The Prime Minister also held several bilateral meetings with world leaders, the key ones with President Mahmoud Abbas of Palestine and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Be in his meeting with President Zelensky or his address at the UN, even at the Quad Leaders Summit, the Prime Minister reiterated India's long-held position that resolution to global conflicts can only be found through dialogue and diplomacy, sitting across the table, not on the battlefield. With cameraman Sanjay Jena, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in New York.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said that unless there is peace and tranquility on the border, there is no scope of normalization of relations with China. He was interacting with a select gathering in New York at Asia Society Policy Institute. During the interaction, while he elaborated with India's overall relations with the world, he specifically mentioned that bloody clash at border amidst COVID pandemic itself has overshadowed the relationship, and after a series of negotiations, only 75% of disengagement has taken place.
Until we are able to restore peace and tranquility on the border and ensure that the agreements which we have signed up to are adhered, it's obviously difficult to carry on with the rest of the relationship. So what has been the focus for the last 4 years is to, in the first instance, at least disengage the troops, which means that they go back to the camp, to the military bases from which they traditionally operate, because right now both sides have troops who are deployed forward. And when I said 75% of it has been sorted out, I was asked in a way to quantify it to give a sense. It's only of the disengagement.
India's External Affairs Minister also said that both countries need to take care of the protocol of border patrols. That is not tricky part and part of daily routine that needs attention.
And the main issue right now is the patrolling. How do we, both of us, I would say, patrol up to the line of actual control. And right now, the patrolling arrangements after 2020 have been disturbed. So we've been able to sort out much of the disengagement, the friction points, but some of the patrolling issues need to be resolved. But once we deal with the disengagement, there is the larger issue, which is both of us have brought very large number of troops up to the border. So there is what we call the de-escalation issue.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is in the United States and is representing India at the 79th General Debate Session of the UNGA. On the sidelines of this, he is meeting foreign ministers of various countries. The minister met his Guyanese counterpart, Hugh Hilton Todd, during which he asserted that the bilateral partnership between both the nations has been steadily progressing in various dimensions. The leaders look forward to its further growth. The minister also held a good conversation with his Cyprus counterpart, Konstantinos Kombos. Now, the talks focused on the ongoing development in West Asia and the larger implications. The two leaders also discussed taking our bilateral cooperation forward. He also met Moldovan Foreign Minister Mihai Bobzoi. They discussed the potential for cooperation in investment, education and tourism. Dr. S. Jaishankar and Bobzoi also exchanged views on the Ukraine conflict. The minister also met his dear friend, European Union Commissioner Wopke Hoekstra. Jaishankar appreciated his support for deepening India-EU partnership. External Affairs Minister also met his Bolivian counterpart, Celina Zosa. Both sides talked about advancing bilateral cooperation. Earlier, the minister also met Spanish counterpart, Jose Manuel Alvarez. They talked about bilateral cooperation as well as Ukraine and West Asia. India has called for increasing international cooperation to fight the synthetic drug trade, which has been used by terrorists against the country. Speaking at the summit of the Global Coalition to Address Synthetic Drug Threats, hosted by US President Joe Biden, Dr. S. Jaishankar called for enhanced operational cooperation, intelligence sharing, and stronger law enforcement collaboration to combat the synthetic drug trade. India has long been affected by the nexus between terrorist groups and narco-trafficking. Cross-border rackets smuggle drugs into our territory with proceeds supporting terrorism. Synthetic drugs include fentanyl, methamphetamine, Captagon and MDMA, which are often more potent and more lethal than plant-based drugs like cocaine or heroin, according to the coalition. Also, Jaishankar said that India, as co-chair of Working Group 1, has taken a proactive stance and has focused on preventing the illicit manufacturing and trafficking of synthetic drugs. Finally, he expressed confidence that collective resolve and cooperation of India and the US will build a safer, drug-free world for all. The All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi, is celebrating its 69th Foundation Day on Wednesday. India's Health and Family Welfare Minister, JP Nadda, will preside over the Foundation Day celebrations and will also inaugurate the exhibition on innovation in healthcare and medical education. The first AIIMS was established in Delhi in 1956 under All India Institute of Medical Sciences Act 1956, and since then, in the last decade, the number of AIIMS have tripled to 22. The Met Department has warned about extremely heavy rainfall expected in Maharashtra, coastal and north interior Karnataka and Goa for the next few days. The Met Department has forecast heavy to very heavy rainfall in coastal and interior Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh and Vidarbha today. Isolated severe downpour is predicted in Goa, Madhya Maharashtra and Konkan from 24th of September to 26th. Gujarat region may also witness the same weather on 25th and 26th of September. Marathwala will witness it on 24th of September. Kutch and Saurashtra are likely to receive such conditions from 24th to 28th of September. The IMD also said that a low pressure area has formed over West Central Bay of Bengal and adjoining Northwest Bay of North Andhra and South Odisha coasts under the influence of cyclonic circulation. A quick look at other stories making it to the headlines from across India. India's Railway Minister Ashwini Vaishnav on Tuesday launched a state-of-the-art Kavach 4.0 system on the 108 kilometers long Kota-Sawai Madhopur rail section in Rajasthan. Kavach is an automatic train protection system designed to enhance train safety by automatically applying brakes in case of driver inaction and ensuring safe operations during harsh weather conditions. The preparation review meeting for the 55th International Film Festival 2024 was held on Tuesday. Deliberations were held on strategies to make this year's IFFI more people-centric, inclusive and festive. IFFI 2024 will feature an entertainment arcade where Indian cinema and culture will be celebrated with people's participation. The festival will be held between 20th and 28th of November in Goa. India is celebrating Antyodaya Diwas to mark the birth anniversary of Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay and remember his life and legacy. Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay was a prominent thinker in Indian political and social philosophy. His philosophy of Antyodaya, meaning the rise of the last person, was centered on addressing the needs of the underprivileged sections of the society. Also, the day is being celebrated since 2014 with focus on creating an inclusive India where no one is left behind. All right, on to updates from the world of business now. China and Hong Kong stocks rallied broadly for a second day on Wednesday as investors basked in the afterglow of the slew of measures announced on Tuesday to prop up the ailing economy. In early trade, China's blue chip CSI 300 index and the Shanghai Composite Index gained more than 2% each. Hong Kong benchmark Hang Seng jumped 3%, while Hang Seng Tech Index surged more than 3%. Experts say market rally could continue to bring markets higher over the next few sessions. Earlier, U.S. stocks too closed higher on Tuesday, riding on China's announcement, shrugging off weak consumer confidence data. High end came after the indices initially trimmed gains after a report from the conference board revealed on an unexpected decline in the U.S. consumer confidence in September. The S&P 500 gained 0.25%, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.56%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.2%. Weekly jobless claims and personal consumption expenditure data remain in focus this week. The U.S. Department of Justice has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Visa, accusing the company of illegally maintaining a monopoly over the U.S. debit card market. The lawsuit, following a 3-year investigation, claims Visa's practices have cost American consumers and businesses billions in excessive fee while stifling innovation in the payment industry. Visa allegedly enforces exclusionary agreements with merchants and banks, penalizing those who use alternative payment networks. The suit also accuses Visa of partnering with tech companies to neutralize competition and imposing restrictions that limit rivals' market access. Visa, which earns $8 billion annually in the U.S. debit fee, denies the allegations. General Counsel Julie Rottenberg called the claims meritless, arguing the debit card market is highly competitive. India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will attend the 9th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank today in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Ahead of this, the minister met Minister of Investments, Industry and Trade of Uzbekistan. India is the second largest shareholder of the AIIB. The multilateral discussions will be centered around a broad spectrum of important global issues relevant to the development agenda. The finance minister will also sign the bilateral investment treaty between India and Uzbekistan. The treaty aims to promote more extensive economic cooperation for the mutual benefit of both countries on a long-term basis. As part of her 5-day visit, she is expected to call on Uzbek president besides holding bilateral meetings with her counterparts and interacting with Indian diaspora. Let's talk of sports now. In the Indian duo of Jeevan Nedunchenena and Vijay Sundar Prashant won the Hangzhou Open 2024 title after beating Germany in the men's doubles final in China on Tuesday. The pair defeated the German pair of Konstantin Franzen and Henrik Jebens for 4-6, 7-6, 10-7 in the final. It conceded the first set to the Germans before fighting its way back into the match to go all the way. Jeevan and Vijay pulled off a comeback in the semi-finals against Uruguay's Ariel Behan and USA's Robert Galloway. After the Indians conceded the first set 6-0 to Behar and Galloway, they went on to win the second set and the tie-breaker. Harry Brook smashed his maiden ODI 100 as England beat Australia by 46 runs on the basis of DLS method in the third ODI at Riverside Ground. After being asked to bat first, the Aussies put up a healthy score of 304 for 7 on the board. But it was the partnership of 84 runs between Steve Smith and Cameron Green that steadied the ship. Batting at third, Smith scored 60 runs off 82 balls with 5 fours before Jofra Archer accounted for his wicket. With this win, Australia's 14-match winning streak in ODIs has also ended. England made it 1-2 and kept their hopes alive of winning the 5-match series after rain halted play with their score at 254 for 4 while chasing 305. That's it in this edition of DD India News at But. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can download the respective QR codes. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.